Okay. Right. As you're well aware, we have had an elongated discussion relating to this item. There may be issues arising out of what has happened here in the chamber this evening, but we have an agreement that they will be dealt with after this meeting. But my decision relating to the wish for a proposal to be made under a notice of motion is that I will not allow that notice of decision to be made, because it was made solely on the basis of questions to cabinet members. It was not made on any specific decision.
Point of order, Madam Mayor. After you closed questions for cabinet, it was
decision that we will not be taking that point of order in the manner that Councillor Evans wished to do so. There may be discussions to be held about previous consequences to that, but I am not allowing that point of order, that decision to be made under the point of order based on the fact that it was raised under questions to cabinet. That is my decision. I have made my decision. I am not changing it. You can raise as many points of order as you want. I am not changing that decision. And if there is going to be decision that I have made in this chamber, I will suspend this meeting.
A quotation from an email that I had received from the head of legal. I believe it is only fair and appropriate, given that I made that in a public record and a matter of on the cameras, that following that discussion, I think it's only fair to also put on record that, having read out that quotation, I have subsequently in the adjournment been told that that advice was given incorrectly. And I think that that should be recorded for the public record, given that I read it out before the adjournment. That's my point of personal explanation.
I apologise with it being made as a public record. Thank you. 11, recommend the resident involvement strategy, A. Pardon? Motion without notice, Madam Mayor. Continue.
Allows me to move a motion without notice under 4A12N to suspend a particular council procedural rule. I therefore request the suspension of 4A11 motions on notice to allow a motion not on notice to be considered.
Okay, that is a procedural motion, so a show of hands will be taken to do so. All those in favour of that motion, please show. And those against? The motion is lost.
Of order, Madam. I'm allowed to have my vote individually recorded. Can I have it recorded in the minutes, please, that I voted for the procedural motion to allow a motion not on notice? Thank you.
Every single one of you is going to ask to have it recorded in the minutes. We will do that anyway. The agenda, which is the resident involvement strategy. I will take one more point of order, Councillor Evans, and that is it.
Yeah, it's all well and good saying that, Madam Mayor, but the Constitution physically states, and you can ask the solicitor, in order to have your vote minuted in the minutes, you have to stand up to the Mayor and make that formal request. I request that my vote on the most recent meeting.
Right, did in the minutes. So we will have those two recorded, please.
Madam, recorded vote be taken.
Quiet, please. I've said twice this evening, I will not put up with members shouting across this chamber whilst I am chairing these meetings. Thank you. If anyone now wishes to put their hand up and raise the point of order saying they want their note recorded in their minutes, please do so now. We need to continue with this meeting. Well, you can all raise your point of order and say what you have to say.
Point
15(4)(c) of the Constitution, I ask my vote be recorded.
Vote be recorded, please.
In the Constitution, can you please record my vote? Thank you.
Mayor, can you please record my vote, please? Thank you.
Section of the Constitution, could you please record my vote? Thank you.
You please record my vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. If you could also record my vote. Thank you.
Same to me also, the record vote.
Thank you. Please record my vote.
Same item of the Constitution. Can you please record my vote?
Being under the Constitution, can you record my vote, please? I don't want them to be the only ones.
Now move on to the next item on the agenda, which is the resident involvement strategy. Councillor Jackson, will you move the recommendation, please?
I do think we need to get the electrical equipment tested again because, like others in the chamber, I've had to press it several times, so I will ask Councillor Shepherd if she will look at that. Madam Mayor, on page 61, I believe the Residents' Involvement Strategy report is set out. The recommendations are clearly there. I so move that strategy.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. I would like to support the residents' involvement strategy, Madam Mayor. Quite often, a number of our tenants are actually some of the most vulnerable in our society, actually, and also some of the most fragile, especially those who have reached the grand old age where they need some support from the council. So I think this is actually a really good step in the right direction of providing a voice to those residents in how we look after them basically in trusteeship of making sure that they are given that provision that they need. What I would say, Madam Mayor, is that like the Managing Our Future strategy document, what would be good to see as the next step from this is actually, these are all good aims and laudable aims under each of the different themes, but it would be nice to see a more detailed strategy document as to how those will be implemented, like recently went to the Cabinet over the Managing Our Future ideals that went forward there, because I think it would be useful to actually have some flesh on the bones of how this residents' involvement strategy will work, so that also the residents can see what will be what they can expect from the council in a bit more detail and what their rights are, but also what their obligations are, because with rights also come responsibilities, Madam Mayor. And it would be interesting to see exactly how, for example, we go through, particularly on our agenda item, pages 71 and 72, but they're pages 6 and 7 of the actual strategy. They've got the aims, like promote resident involvement within our community. I'm sure everyone in this chamber will support that, but I think what's important to do is say how we're actually going to do that, whether that be through working parties, inviting residents to have little working groups within their complexes, or writing to them, or social media. However, I think that would be useful to have moving forward. But on the whole, I think it's a positive move in the right direction. I hope the portfolio holder and the leader will take those comments as constructive comments moving forward, because even though I think I actually have one of the, possibly the only ward which doesn't have any social housing in Whitestone, I do actually care quite passionately about this, because as other members, I've had family members live in council-owned facilities, and it's important that we give them that voice, which they don't always have. The louder we can shout for them, the better, Madam Mayor, so we will support it on this side.
Yeah, it's really important, resident involvement. We have 5,000 odd flats and apartments and houses, and they're spread quite widely around the borough. I've got 3 lots in my area: Cleaver Gardens, Ryde Avenue and Carisbrook. And over my 7 years as being a councillor, there's obviously been a large number of issues, and I've taken part in various of these activities, but in particular estate walkabouts, which are really, really valuable in terms of getting grounds maintenance, housing officers, the residents exec, as whatever they're called this week. They were really useful, but they're going sadly wrong because we've lost our housing newspaper that went around to residents, so the residents don't know when the walkabouts are happening, and sometimes the councillors don't know when the walkabouts are happening because the dates are only published on the day of the walkabout, which is incredible. If you want to find out when the state walkabout is, you have to look on the council's website, find a page, find a spreadsheet, have Microsoft Excel, open the spreadsheet, and then you find that the estate walkabout for Carisbrooke was on the day the spreadsheet was published, and you find there isn't going to be a estate walkabout for Cleaver Gardens. Maybe there'll be one added later. The whole thing doesn't work at the moment, so I think we need to publish an annual calendar for these estate walkabouts, which the councillors and the residents get a paper copy. They can pin it on their boards and we can have 4 walkabouts a quarter that are really effective, because the estate walkabouts is where we actually get all the intelligence, where we actually have all the right people together, hopefully. Glendale occasionally used to turn up. We used to have the PCSO turn up, and if the PCSO and Glendale could even turn up once a year to a walkabout, we may pick up a lot of intelligence and greatly improve the lives for our residents. So I'm really keen on this strategy, but it's not working because the walkabouts are total failure at the moment. When they're unannounced, no one turns up, and even the councillors don't know they're on. The police don't turn up anymore. Glendale turned up about a year ago once. Yeah, they need to be working better. So I do hope we sort out these problems, and we haven't got a state walkabout at all, I say, at Cleaver Gardens, where we have virtually no maintenance from Glendale for so far this year. The place is looking like the Wild West. The housing officers keep changing. We need to sort the estate walkabouts out because they are potentially very good, and I'd actually like to compliment our handyman who attend to walkabouts, because a lot of the little jobs, the hinges, the wobbly pavements, do get sorted out on these estate walkabouts because we have a very useful handyman. Thank you.
Watkins.
Yeah, Councillor Wilson, take that on board, no problem. Councillor Concourt, I've seen your things on Facebook and Twitter, also calling the council. We do put a yearly list out of where we do the walkabouts. It is for people to find out. I go on my walkabouts every time. People turn up, people point out faults, things get fixed. You've also gone out on social media, said that there's been nothing done in your area. Again, totally wrong. There's been plenty of things done in your area. In fact, I was in your area this morning, along with some officers. So, once again, misleading the public, and it's not nice, it's not fair to our officers. So, I just wish you'd stop it, really.
Watkins, I have no... Councillor Jackson, you have the right to reply.
Say that homing in is available online, and I believe a paper copy does go to the complexes, the independent living units. I'll stand corrected on that. But I'm going to refer everybody to 4.3 on page 65 of our agenda today. This is a strategy document that we are being asked to approve tonight, but there is a huge role for overview and scrutiny panels, and 4.3 does clearly state that there will be a review, there will be an annual update to the relevant scrutiny panel, and Madam Mayor, I'd advise all members of Overview and Scrutiny to get involved to make sure that the strategies of this council really do give benefit to the residents in the way that we wish them to. Not everything is done in the council chamber. There's a huge role here for overview and scrutiny, and I would encourage members to really get stuck into that work to make sure that the residents who we all want to benefit do so.
We'll move to the vote. All those in favour, please show. I believe that to be unanimous. Thank you very much. Which is the General Fund Housing Review Account and Capital Programme Outturn 2018-19. Councillor Jackson, will you move the recommendations as...
To do that, and we refer members to the fact we are discussing items as written on pages 77, 78 and 79 of tonight's agenda.
Please.
The report this evening, it's just a simple record about how we spend money, so it's not something you can really disagree with. However, on page 77, members will see that £11,000 has been taken from the miscellaneous fund for the audio-visual system within this chamber. There's clearly a lot of problems with this system. I think my favourite video, because I don't really have a life, so I watch council video meetings on YouTube. My favourite one was Councillor Troman's, where he stood up and said, "Mr Mayor, thank you." So what we need is a similar system to that of Labour-controlled Coventry City Council, where you can actually stream the meetings live, and then at the end of the meeting, you can actually select, you can actually click on the part of the meeting you want to watch, and it takes you directly to it, instead of having to go for a YouTube video for 2 hours to find, or 6 hours to find the part of the video you want to watch. So when the leader makes her closing remarks on this report, could you tell me what the £11,000 is for exactly? Is it to upgrade the current system, or is it to fund a new system altogether? I'd like the latter, really.
To raise the issue about the council chamber audio system, I think tonight's proving yet another timely reminder about how that system actually does need overhauling. I don't really like spending money on ourselves, Madam Mayor. If anyone was looking from the outside in, they would say, why are you actually spending money on yourselves? But actually, I think it's really important that members of the public can see what is going on in this chamber. We might have our disagreements and ding-dongs across the chamber, but actually I think residents deserve to see those ding-dongs, whether they agree with us, whether they disagree with us. And I think it's an important tool to encourage democratic debate. Not everyone is as assiduous, I believe is the correct word for Councillor Evans, but there are people who do comment. I have had members say that. And again, I do believe it needs to be real-time, really, if at all possible, so that members of the public can see what is going on in real time, if possible, and then save it for download later, if that is at all possible. I think it is increasingly evident. I think I can remember these from 10 years ago when I was first elected, and I don't think they've really been overhauled. But I think in this case, we do need to do a bit of housekeeping. So I don't, in this instance, object overly to spending money on ourselves in this case. But another one from 10 years ago, Madam Mayor, is my old friend Valley Farm refurbishments. I know that there are issues meaning that this has to be considered on pink paper, and so the leader can't give a straightforward answer on this. But given the tumultuous history of this item, could the leader please arrange, or try and arrange, an update be given to members on this, because it is £150,000 of taxpayers' money which is allocated to something which hasn't been done for 10 years, and if we are going to be strung along and played out on this, I think members need to be kept up to date on what is going on, because I'm sure all members would actually think if we didn't have to spend this money on Valley Farm, and there is a disagreement over that, but I'm sure we could all find worthy projects in our wards and in our communities where that £150,000 worth of capital investment could be better used. So I think we deserve to be kept up to date on that. So if the leader could give an undertaking, I think that would be fair to all members on all sides about what is going on with that. Because 10 years ago I sat there and saw this on there, and it hasn't moved since. And really, we should be seeing some progress, if at all possible. 10 years is a long time of anyone's life to have to see something not move. So I hope the leader will take that forward, Madam Mayor.
Councillor Condacourt.
Our systems seem to be a bit temperamental today. The other thing that needs sorting on the AV are the projectors, because obviously when it's a hot day they shut down and overheat, which particularly during planning meetings is a right inconvenience when they start shutting down because they're mounted so close to the ceiling. So I think the projectors need the fans changing or some cooling or something, so we don't keep losing the projectors when we actually have planning meetings in here. The two things I wanted to raise the 50,000 for timing equipment at the Pingles, because obviously the Pingles isn't that old a building, so why are we spending 50,000 now on new timing equipment? I think that has sort of crept in. I don't know where it's come from. I don't think it's ever been discussed as to whether we can refurbish, but 50,000 is quite a lot when there's people being charged council tax, struggling to pay, all sorts of issues, and then they find 50,000 is going on the Pingles for new clocks. So I'd like to know a bit more about that. Investment properties. It's now up to £3.4 million we're proposing on buying investment properties, some of which will be flats to rent out. We've got badly stung, it looks, on those flats in Attleborough, the vile green ones. I do think we need to be really careful over what investment properties we are buying to make sure that they are lettable and they will retain their value, particularly because of the market uncertainties. There's a lot of good things on here. I mean, the council has a big capital programme, an awful lot of which is really good. The empty property loans, really good if we can get those working. And a lot of the stuff on the housing stuff is really beneficial. You know, we are bringing standards up. The people who have got the new door entry systems at Cleaver Gardens really like them. The people who haven't got them are moaning when are they going to get them. So there is a lot of good stuff on here. But I do think we also need to be careful on some of the big ticket items. Thank you.
Leader, Mr Wilson has asked my question about Valley Farm. I would be grateful if we could sort this out. It's been dragging on for years and years. I shall be retired soon and we still haven't sorted it out. Also, can I ask about the vehicle and plant replacement on amounts reprofiled from 2018 to 19, the £228,900. I'd like to know what that would be for. Thank you.
The Walmsley.
My item relates to page 77, Central Services and Refuge major repairs. An item listed for a base budget of £250,000 for the 19-20 financial year. In the same vein as a number of other comments we made earlier, that is £250,000 is obviously a very large sum of money. And maybe I could ask, or it could be heard from the other side, whether we could perhaps have some sort of more information, flesh on the bone as to actually what that's for. Because obviously Central Services and Refuse is a very large department in terms of the areas at which it manages. So it would be very nice if we could, perhaps members could have some information on as to what that £250,000 is going to be for and going towards. Thank you.
Madam Mayor. Just to ask for the breakdown of the target hardening, £100,000. It was agreed in the meetings that we had last year that we would actually have further information on what the £100,000 was going to be spent on, and that's not been forthcoming as of yet, and it's still in the budget, so I would like a breakdown of what that is going to be spent on. The AV stuff I was going to bring up, but it's already been dealt with. On page 78, where we're talking about planning and development, we've got replacement CCTV cameras and also CCTV wireless technology. Does that relate to the mobile cameras that we have? It was brought up in the External Reviewing Scrutiny Committee last week about the lack of movement on some of these mobile CCTV cameras. So I'd like to know a bit more about why we're spending £120,000 and what use we're going to make of it, because given the recent incidents, I think we need to address that and make sure things are being dealt with properly and in the right places.
Thank you, Speaker. Councillor Jackson, would you like the right to reply, please?
Questions, and there have been questions from members opposite and around the chamber, are questions that could have very easily have been sent to council officers for reply. And I'd still encourage members, you don't have to wait until full council to actually ask your questions. You'll get a detailed reply from officers to your detailed questions. So I'd encourage you, rather than waiting for full council, to do that in future. In regard to IT, I think even this evening I'm on board as saying the equipment in the council chamber does need to be looked at, and Councillor Shepherd did nod and say that she was going to look at it. I note that the relevant director is also in our meeting this evening, and it's very important we have something that is fit for purpose. So I'm sure those issues will be taken on board. In regard to Valley Farm, there are some commercially sensitive issues in relation to that, but it has always been my intention as leader of the council to ensure that all elected members are kept updated in this regard, and I can assure you that that will indeed be the case at the appropriate point in time. In regard to several items that members have mentioned opposite, they are actually reprofiled from 1819 into 1920, and rather than take up valuable time this evening in going through them one by one, I will ask you to put those questions, your detailed questions, to officers. In regard to the target hardening, the £100,000 that is scheduled to be spent on that, I will indeed ask Councillor Lloyd if he can get officers to send out details to all elected members in that regard. Madam Mayor, those are the points I've noted here, but I do conclude by saying we have some very professional officers who I'm sure will be more than happy to reply to any elected members' enquiries. Please do take up that opportunity in between council meetings rather than thinking all answers have to be given this evening. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Favour, please show. That seems to be. Anyone against? Abstentions? Thank you. 11C, pay policy.
In accordance with Section 38 of the Localism Act 2011, the Council is required to produce and publish an annual pay policy statement. The statement relates to the remuneration of employees and the Council's approach in ensuring fairness and transparency in pay. The pay policy statement for 2019 as Appendix A was approved by individual member decision on the 18th of June 2019, and as per the requirements of the Act is now submitted to full Council for ratification and approval to publish. And I ask for the recommendations within the report to be accepted. Thank you.
Anyone wishes to speak? Councillor Condical.
Yeah, generally the pay levels at Nuneaton and Bedworth are far more reasonable than places like the County Council, where I'm getting increasingly concerned at very high levels of pay, particularly for some of the new posts. So I don't really have too much of a problem with the levels of pay, but one thing I do want us to take a careful look in this pay policy is performance and increments, because obviously as the councils get shorter and shorter of staff, we're having less and less reviews of staff performance, and I do want us to actually set some, particularly for the more senior managers, some performance targets and tie those in more with the increments. But generally the levels of pay and the pay ratios at the Borough Council are far more reasonable than at the County Council. You know, you're looking at like 2 points for, I think, between average, lowest and average and things. So the ratios aren't out of this world, but I say we do need to make sure the performance system works properly.
I have no more.
The recommendations as printed at 2.1.
What I hope will be an amendment which everyone can endorse tonight, and I have copies here for all members. Dave. Engrossed in thought there, Dave. After recommendation 2.1, insert 2.2, that the Executive Director Resources write to Warwickshire Police to request that where a dome hawk camera that has been purchased by the Borough Council for the purposes of community safety has been in situ continuously for more than 2 years, consideration is given by Warwickshire Police to purchase their own permanent camera to enable cameras purchased by Nuneaton and Bedworth to be freed up and returned to mobile usage. A number of years ago now, this council purchased a number of dome hawk cameras for community safety and reassurance. That number was also brought up to an average of 1 per ward when the Conservative Party was last in control. So there are 17 dome hawk cameras available. And I know I'm not the only member, and I know of members on the other side of the chamber as well, who are frustrated, shall we say, that when they look at the list of where the mobile cameras are located, that they don't seem to move. And I can think of at least one, which, although is there for an entirely honourable and decent reason, really should be a permanent camera. It's a permanent camera in all but name, but being used for a temporary purpose. And really, this council, on all sides of the chamber, is invested in community safety, and all we are asking for is that the resources we have put in good faith, be used for the reasons that they were purchased by this authority. I'm aware that all authorities are under financial pressure, whether they be this authority or the police authority. But there should be some thought moving forward about allowing the resources that we put in, and that's why I said the Executive Director Resources, because they were paid for by this council, to actually say, let's be fair to community safety, let's be fair to the residents, the taxpayers of this borough who actually forked out the money for these mobile cameras, and allow them to be returned to their original usage. I know of members on my side, I'm sure the leader can recount members on her own side, where they have had examples of antisocial behaviour, criminality, etc., where they feel that a dome hawk camera would have been of benefit, but because there have been other competing priorities, and I accept these are a matter of priorities for the police, that is where they have to be, but also they have to balance that with where the resources actually came. I mean, I know of instances in my own ward where there was allegations of racism and targeted behaviour against shop owners, for example. And we were fortunate in that instance to get a dome hawk camera. But in other instances, we have been unfortunate not to get that. I know that Councillor Golby has been making strident representations in her own ward for them. So I'm hoping, Madam Mayor, that this amendment will be seen for what it is, which is a friendly amendment to ask that our residents be put first, that the Commissioner and the Warwickshire Police give due consideration. They have to look at their own budgets, just as we do, but just to make the question, to ask the question, is all that I think this council is rightly, fairly and responsibly putting forward to Warwickshire Police to move forward. And I would hope, and I'm seeing nods from Councillor Jackson, but I would hope that this amendment would go through unanimously from all sides, and that's what it's intended to do, Madam Mayor. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Friendly amendment to the recommendation.
And that you were seconding the friendly amendment. Yes.
I do hope we get a cross-party commitment to actually step up safer neighbourhoods.
Councillor Longdon.
Going for these, I understand the sentiments, understand why they want them. However, there's nothing in here to say about the ongoing maintenance of these things and how they actually get monitored. That's the expensive bit. Who does the monitoring? It should be the police. If those fixed cameras are belonging to the police should monitor them. They shouldn't come through here, because we get nothing for that at all. So rather than put a burden on our own staff, if we're going to go down this line, fine, I haven't got a problem. But the police have to monitor that if they're going to put those cameras in.
Just to clarify, for the record, really, that we do actually say that Warwickshire Police pursue their own permanent cameras to free up our mobile ones. So the onus would be on them to monitor and maintain, because it would be part of their estate and not anything that we would need to monitor and maintain.
Is there anything more you wish to add, Councillor Jackson?
Where cross-party support is forthcoming on a very, very important issue. So I'm pleased that when we can, we're more than happy to work collegiately. And I'm sure there will be a unanimous vote for this with the friendly amendment as moved by Councillor Wilson.
Now moving to the vote, taking on board the alteration of the friendly amendment that was moved by Councillor Wilson. All those in favour, please show. We will be moving on to the questions by members. I believe there is adequate time to take the questions by members, but no matter what, I will be finishing the meeting by 9 o'clock. Thank you. Who is unfortunately not here at the moment. Question 2 was by Councillor Kyle Evans.
Absolutely vital for the local environment. They reduce flooding, they reduce CO2 in the atmosphere, leading to cleaner air, and they provide habitat to wildlife. That is why I'm absolutely delighted that the government recently launched its Urban Tree Challenge Fund, a £10 million pot of money for local councils to apply for towards having more trees in urban environments. Could I ask the portfolio holder if he welcomes the government's announcement and whether the council plans to bid for some of this money?
The answer is yes. We do welcome it. Although, you know, it is a fund that's aimed at... sorry, I get out of breath. It's aimed at street trees, it's aimed at community groups, it's aimed at community groups that are working on woodlands, etc., etc. But the answer is yes, we do welcome it, and we will be looking at it later in the year.
Amount of complaints about the standards of ground maintenance at the Coventry Road and Marston Lane cemeteries in Bedworth and the understandable emotional significance of maintaining the cemeteries, will the Borough Council consider giving the Borough's cemeteries the same importance as the Borough's premier parks in terms of standards of grounds maintenance?
Sir Lloyd, if you're more comfortable sitting down to answer, I'm quite happy.
Madam Mayor, yeah, we share your view of importance of maintaining our cemeteries to a high standard. I totally agree with that. With this in mind, the new grounds maintenance contract that takes place in November of this year will require 16 cuts in those cemeteries, and I think the figure before was 12 per annum on a frequency basis to meet the growing concerns and the growth patterns of the grass. But we will, for the first time also, be allowing the use of retardants within the cemeteries to keep the grass back. So we do, want to see our cemeteries spick and span and all up to date with cutting, etc. And I feel that the contract that we've bringing in November will do that.
Oh, I'm sorry. Would I dare miss Councillor Llewellyn-Nash?
It was stated in a recent report to Cabinet that the council has lost £57,000 in income from car park meters. Could the portfolio holder outline the reasons for this? And will he consider implementing Conservative group policy of charging £1 for 3 hours parking in our town centre in order to boost our local economy? Thank you.
Councillor Lloyd.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. Firstly, Madam Mayor, you can't lose something you haven't got. You know, we were 3% down on forecast income on ticketing, but also that also equates to 97%, or being 97% on target of your budget. Now, surely even the party opposite would think that that was a fair return on the budget, 97% target. Madam Mayor, 2 years ago we started providing free car parking from 6 p.m, 7 days a week, and a £1 flat fee on Sundays. I'm sure that the residents who visit the Civic Hall and Abbey Theatre to go into town in the evening welcome that move, although it reduced income. We also have season permits whereby you can park for £1 a day, introduced to help employees who work in the town and other residents who spend a lot of time in the town. We also made, in the last 2 years, 2 car parks free. Reduces our income. It's undeniable that the unprecedented changes in the way residents shop and use their local high streets has had a detrimental impact across the whole of the country and not just our towns, with national data reflecting a 2.3 average drop year on year in footfall nationally. Both towns have lost a co-op. We've also lost a BHS store in Nuneaton. This all has impact. As for the £1 for 3 hours, Councillor, well, Madam Mayor, this will reduce income even further. At the budget, the Tories indicated that this proposal would cost the council £281,000, and this was only for 9 months, and that £273,560, your words on your budget, pounds to be taken from general fund balances using unallocated reserves as a one-off. A one-off use of reserves which would reduce these reserves close to the minimal acceptable level. And on the other hand, Madam Mayor, they proposed also to introduce a 5-hour charge at £4.80, a 6-hour charge at £6, and increase the 24-hour charge from £6.50 to £8. I suspect, Madam Mayor, that the money they said they were going to raise from this, but they actually said it was a saving. Saving who? Not saving the residents of this borough by increasing and putting new charges out there. Madam Mayor, perhaps if they wanted to increase footfall, they would, like us, try and put pressure on the county council and bus companies to reduce ticket prices, and also, as stated earlier, during the West Midlands Transport Authority. Bus prices are more expensive than the £1 an hour, right? £1 an hour on a bus wouldn't even get you out the station. Madam Mayor, this side of the chamber will not take a gamble on their politically motivated, headline-grabbing nonsense. We are not Northampton. We will not let this council go bust. So no, at this current time, I will remind residents of the facts. And Councillor Brown, if you're tweeting this already, are you? Like most tweets you've done tonight? So at this current time, I remind residents of the fact that it was their intention to use £273,560 in their budget proposal of taxpayers' money from reserves to buy votes as a one-off with no idea on how to pay it back.
Councillor Brown.
Try not to tweet this at the same time I'm talking. Look, both hands. Yeah, I don't know what I'm using. Anyway, I've recently received a copy of correspondence sent to the Council from the Secretary of the Bedworth and District Horticultural Council, highlighting concern over the absence of provision for new allotments within any of the Bedworth, Exhall, Ash Green and Kersley sites earmarked for housing development as part of the newly adopted Borough Plan. Given the commitments in the Borough Plan to improving the health and well-being of residents and the development of allotment provision in the Borough, and in particular with reference to the new allotments in policy NE2, will the portfolio holder commit this Council to remedying this omission by requiring that suitable and sufficient land for additional allotment provision is set aside as part of or close to any of the said development sites that do go ahead in Bedworth, Exhall, Ash Green and Kersley?
Councillor Brown.
The Mayor, and thank you to ourselves, and we will be replying, Chairman. Madam Mayor, there's 12 strategic sites allocated for residential development in the Borough Local Plan. Of these, 6 are within Nuneaton, and the 2 largest have provision for new allotments as part of the development. 2 sites are within Bulkington, one of which has provision for allotments as part of the development of the other 4 sites that are within Bedworth, one of which has provision for allotments as part of the development. As we all know, and as we've all discussed, the local plan has to be based on evidence in relation to allotments. The relevant evidence is the Nuneaton and Bedworth allotment strategy that was ran from 2012 to 2022. This highlighted that there were a number of areas, totally agree, within the borough deficient in allotment provision, and states those as Galley Common and Bermuda Villages, Whitestone, Kersley, Hawkesbury and Bulkington. This led to the strategy stating that where there was a deficiency, developments of more than 1,000 dwellings would require on-site provision of allotments. Where sites are smaller than this, a contribution in lieu of on-site provision will be sought from the developers. In relation to the sites where deficiency has been highlighted, there are no strategic allocations in Galley Common. There is provision for on-site provisions of allotments at Arbury, the closest site to Bermuda Village. There are no allocations at Kersley, and allocations at Hawkesbury and Bulkington include on-site provision. A contribution will be requested from the strategic allocation in Whitestone, because I don't think there's ever been any. Nearest Whitestone one is probably in Attleborough. When the plan is reviewed, a full review of the evidence base will be undertaken, and the results of this will feed into the review. I totally agree. We need more allotment.
Thank. Order.
Yeah, in accordance with members can refer certain items arising from a question or statement to a relevant overview and scrutiny panel, and I think Councillor Brown raises quite an important issue about allotments in Bedworth, which we need to have further discussion on. So I'd like to move formally that we refer this to the internal overview and scrutiny panel.
Is there a seconder for that point of order? Councillor Walmsley. Allotments be referred to the relevant overview and scrutiny committee. Is that agreed? So a show of hands, please. Thank you.
The draft 2018-19 MBBC accounts state in the main variances on the Generals Fund section, reduced income due to a decrease in council tax summonses being issued by £75,000. This council has used council tax summonses liability orders as an income stream for too many years. These charges seem to amount to £250,000 to £300,000 a year, when the income from the summonses should ideally only been enough to cover the cost of the action. which should have meant a reduction in summonses, should have been cost neutral. Will the leader take a look at the profits the council has been making from these summonses / liability orders, with a view of reducing the number of summonses issued, making better use of the local council tax support scheme, and reviewing the amounts charged to some of the least well-off in the borough, bearing in mind that any help from the local council tax support scheme only costs the Nuneaton and Bedworth Borough Council 13p in every pound paid out. Thank you.
The Council is required in law to provide justification for the costs being reasonably incurred with regard to obtaining of council tax and non-domestic rates liabilities orders. The Council incurs certain relevant costs, and these include council employee time for preparing and issuing prescribed notices, dealing with enquiries and attendance at court, the cost of printing, paper and postage for the station reminder notices and summons, including relevant staff time to envelope and issue notices, the costs of overheads such as accommodation and support services. The calculation shows that the cost to the council of issuing summonses is over £100, compared to the current charge of £80. In relation to the council's local council tax support scheme, Cabinet will receive a report to its 24th of July meeting setting out options for consultation for the 2021 scheme. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
As we're all too aware, due to the rollout of the disastrous and cruel universal credit, too many families in our borough are living in food poverty. Food, the most basic of human rights, which is being denied to the poorest and most vulnerable people in our society. The Tories even pledged to take away free school meals in their 2017 general election manifesto, attempting to deny some children of their only meal of the day. With the long school summer holiday imminent, can the leader of the council tell me what provision is in place to support these families and to ensure that these children have a hot meal in the absence of a free school lunch?
Your timely question. It is indeed shocking that in 2019 some parents are left struggling to feed their children when free school lunches are not available. However, through Warwickshire County Council's local welfare scheme, parents and guardians of children who were registered and eligible for free school meals this term are able to apply for food vouchers during the summer. However, funds for this scheme are limited, and applications will be considered on a first-come, first-served basis. Applications are accepted from Monday the 22nd of July and Friday the 30th of August. In addition, the Borough Council's financial inclusion support officers can provide support and advice to those that are struggling financially and can assist with referrals to other agencies. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Concludes the members' questions. It also concludes the business of the council. Thank you all very much for your contributions and for your attendance. And could I invite any elected member who wishes to do so to please come along to the parlour where you can have a drink. There is at my expense, and I say that learnedly because I am aware that in the past there's been all sorts of comments made, but you are more than welcome to do so. Thank you all very much.